Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
Christmas morning at Mom's house should have been magical for my 9-year-old son, Tyler, but my sister Patricia turned it into his worst nightmare. While the adults opened gifts in the living room, she forced Tyler into the kitchen to wash every dirty dish from Christmas dinner prep. Then she took a photo and posted it to our family group chat with the caption, "His place is to serve the family." I watched my boy's face crumble as 20 relatives saw his humiliation. My parents' reaction changed everything. The notification sound from my phone felt like a gunshot in the festive silence of Mom's living room. I glanced down and saw the family group chat lighting up with messages. My blood turned to ice when I saw that photo of Tyler, standing at the kitchen sink, his small hands submerged in soapy water, his shoulders hunched with embarrassment. Patricia had captured him from behind, making him look even smaller and more vulnerable against the backdrop of our childhood home's oversized kitchen. But it was the caption that made my vision blur with rage. His place is to serve the family. 7 words that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I shot up from the couch so fast that wrapping paper scattered across the hardwood floor. Mom looked up from her new silk scarf with mild annoyance. "Abram, what's gotten into you? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just held out my phone showing her Patricia's post. Mom squinted at the screen, then her face broke into a wide smile. Oh, how wonderful Patricia's teaching Tyler some responsibility. That boy needs structure in his life. Dad leaned over Mom's shoulder to look his reading glasses sliding down his nose. He chuckled warmly. Good for Patricia. Someone needs to show that kid the value of hard work. My hands shook as I watched the hearts and thumbs up reactions multiply under the photo. Aunt Dorothy commented, "Finally, a child who understands respect." Uncle Frank added, "Patricia knows what she's doing. Wish more parents had her backbone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the same people who used to spoil me rotten when I was Tyler's age, who never made me lift a finger during holiday gatherings. Now they were celebrating my son's humiliation like it was some kind of parenting breakthrough. "This isn't teaching responsibility," I said, my voice trembling with controlled fury. "This is public humiliation of a 9-year-old child." Patricia emerged from the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel with the satisfaction of someone who'd just accomplished something meaningful. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the kitchen work, and her red Christmas sweater looked pristine. She'd always been the type to orchestrate chaos while keeping herself spotless. "Oh, come off it, Abram. Tyler's fine. A little work never hurt anyone." She gestured dismissively toward the kitchen. "He was actually enjoying himself until you made a big deal about it." Enjoying himself? I pushed past her into the kitchen where Tyler stood frozen at the sink. His dark hair hung in his eyes, and I could see tear tracks on his flushed cheeks. The sight of him looking so defeated made something primal rise up in my throat. "Tyler, buddy, come here." I wrapped my arms around his small frame, feeling how tense his shoulders were. "You don't have to do this anymore." But when I turned back toward the living room, I realized the nightmare was just beginning. Patricia had her phone out again, recording this moment too. "See how he coddles the boy. This is exactly why Tyler needs guidance from someone who won't enable his entitled attitude." Mom appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face stern with disapproval, aimed squarely at me. "Abram, Patricia is trying to help. Ever since your divorce, Tyler's been different, more withdrawn, more difficult. Patricia has experience with troubled children." Troubled. The word hit me like a physical blow. Mom, Tyler isn't troubled. He's been through a divorce, yes, but he's adapting beautifully. His teacher says he's one of the most well-behaved kids in his class, Dad joined the growing audience in the kitchen doorway. Son, sometimes we're too close to see the problems clearly. Patricia's been observing Tyler during family gatherings. She's noticed some concerning patterns. I felt like I was living in an alternate reality. What patterns, Tyler, is polite, helpful, and kind? What exactly has Patricia told you? Patricia stepped forward, her expression shifting into what I recognized as her professional mode. She worked as a child development specialist, and she wielded that credential like a weapon whenever she wanted to sound authoritative. Tyler shows signs of oppositional behavior, attention-seeking, through victim narratives and resistance to appropriate boundaries. The divorce has clearly disrupted his understanding of family hierarchy and respect for adult authority. Every word felt calculated to wound. I looked around the kitchen at my family's faces, seeing their nodding agreement with Patricia's assessment. These people had known Tyler since birth, had watched him grow from a babbling infant into a bright, curious boy. How could they so easily accept this warped version of who he was? "That's complete nonsense," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Tyler is none of those things. Patricia pulled up more photos on her phone. Look at Thanksgiving. Tyler refused to help clear the table when asked. At Uncle Bob's birthday party, he didn't want to share his toys with the younger cousins immediately. Last Easter, he questioned why he had to give up his seat for Grandma when there were other empty chairs. She presented each incident like evidence in a court case, and I watched my parents' faces grow more convinced with each example. But I remembered those moments differently. At Thanksgiving, Tyler was exhausted from a long day and had already helped set the table. At Uncle Bob's party, he'd been protective of a special toy his mom had given him before moving away. At Easter, he'd simply asked why he specifically had to move when there were other options. "Those are normal childhood responses," I protested. "You're twisting innocent moments into evidence of behavioral problems." Mom shook her head sadly. "Honey, you're not seeing this clearly. Patricia has been documenting these incidents because she cares about Tyler's development. She's trying to help him become a respectful young man." The word documenting sent a chill down my spine. I looked at Patricia, who was watching my reaction with unmistakable satisfaction. She'd been building a case against my son, collecting evidence to support her narrative that Tyler was a problem child who needed her intervention. Tyler tugged at my shirt, his voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, can we go home now? I don't feel good." Looking down at his pale face and anxious eyes, I made a decision that would define the next 6 months of our lives. "Yes, buddy, we're leaving." Patricia's voice followed us as I gathered our coats. "Running away won't solve Tyler's problems, Abram. He needs consistency and boundaries, not constant rescue from consequences." As we walked to the car, Tyler's small hand gripping mine tightly, I realized that Christmas morning had revealed a truth I'd been too blind to see. My sister hadn't just humiliated my son with that photograph. She'd been systematically poisoning my family against Tyler for months, positioning herself as his savior, while painting him as a problem that needed solving. The family group chat was still buzzing with supportive messages for Patricia's tough love approach when I finally turned off my phone. But the damage was already done. 20 relatives had seen that photo, read that caption, and agreed that my 9-year-old son's place was to serve the family. What I didn't know yet was that Patricia's campaign against Tyler went far deeper than family politics. She'd been working behind the scenes for months, and Christmas Day was just her public victory lap. The drive home from Mom's house passed in heavy silence. Tyler stared out the passenger window, his breath fogging the glass, as we wound through the snow-covered streets of our small Connecticut town. I kept glancing at his reflection, seeing the way his jaw was clenched tight, fighting back tears he was too proud to shed in front of me. When we pulled into our driveway, Tyler finally spoke. "Dad, why does Aunt Patricia hate me?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned off the engine and shifted to face him fully. "Buddy, Patricia doesn't hate you. She's just..." I struggled for words that wouldn't sound like lies. She has strong opinions about how children should behave. But she doesn't make Emma and Jack wash dishes. They got to play video games all afternoon while I scrubbed pots. His voice cracked slightly. And Grandma and Grandpa think I'm bad now. I wanted to deny it to reassure him that his grandparents loved him unconditionally. But the memory of their faces in that kitchen, the way they'd nodded along with Patricia's assessment, made the words stick in my throat. That night, after Tyler finally fell asleep, I did something I'd never done before. I scrolled back through months of family group chat messages looking for clues I might have missed. What I found made my stomach turn. October 15th, Patricia had posted a photo from Tyler's cousin Emma's birthday party with the caption, "Teaching moments everywhere. Some children understand gratitude, others need more guidance." The photo showed Tyler sitting alone on a couch, looking overwhelmed by the chaos of screaming kids and party games. But Patricia had framed it as him being antisocial and ungrateful. November 3rd. After our family dinner at Dad's favorite restaurant, Patricia had shared her observations about Tyler's concerning behavior. She'd written a lengthy post about how Tyler had asked for a different seat when placed next to his loud toddler cousin, and how this showed inflexibility and self-centeredness. The family had responded with concerned emojis and supportive messages about Patricia's professional insights. November 20th, Patricia had documented Tyler's refusal to participate in the family flag football game, complete with photos of him sitting on the sidelines. But I remembered that day differently. Tyler had twisted his ankle early in the game and was nursing a minor injury. Patricia had somehow twisted his legitimate need to rest into evidence of antisocial tendencies. December 10th, the most damning post of all. Patricia had written about Tyler's emotional manipulation tactics after he'd cried when his cousins excluded him from their secret club. She'd analyzed his tears as calculated attempts to gain adult sympathy and recommended that family members not reinforce this behavior by comforting him. Each post had garnered supportive responses from aunts, uncles, and grandparents who trusted Patricia's professional expertise. They'd praised her for keeping an eye on Tyler's development and thanked her for helping Abram see the situation clearly. I realized with growing horror that Patricia had been conducting a months-long character assassination campaign against my son, and I'd been completely oblivious. Every family gathering, every casual interaction, every childhood mistake had been documented and reframed as evidence of Tyler's supposed behavioral problems. But it got worse, much worse. The next morning, I called Tyler's school to check on his academic progress, something I did periodically since the divorce. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, sounded surprised to hear from me. "Oh, Mr. Collins, I'm glad you called. I was wondering when you'd want to discuss the concerns that were brought to my attention." My blood ran cold. "What concerns?" "Well, Tyler's aunt contacted me a few weeks ago, Patricia Thompson. She identified herself as a child development specialist and mentioned some behavioral issues you've been dealing with at home. She wanted to coordinate our approaches to help Tyler with his adjustment challenges." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. "Patricia contacted you. What exactly did she say?" "She mentioned that Tyler's been struggling with authority figures since the divorce, showing signs of oppositional behavior and attention-seeking. She offered to consult on strategies for maintaining consistent boundaries between home and school." The room started spinning around me. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to be very clear about something. Patricia is not authorized to speak about Tyler's education or behavior. She has no involvement in his care beyond being his aunt." There was a long pause. "Oh my. Mr. Collins, she presented herself as working closely with your family on Tyler's behavioral intervention plan. She had detailed knowledge of specific incidents and seemed very professional." "What kind of incidents?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "She mentioned Tyler's resistance to family responsibilities, his difficulty accepting correction, and his tendency to become emotional when faced with appropriate consequences. She said you'd requested her professional support because Tyler's behavior at family gatherings was becoming concerning. Every word felt like another nail in Tyler's coffin. Patricia had somehow convinced his teacher that my well-behaved, emotionally healthy son was a problem child who needed special monitoring. And she'd done it all behind my back using her professional credentials to give weight to her lies. Mrs. Patterson Tyler doesn't have behavioral problems. He's never been in trouble at school, his grades are excellent, and he's well liked by his peers. Patricia has been feeding you false information. Another uncomfortable silence. Mr. Collins, I have to say Tyler has seemed more withdrawn lately. He's been less participative in class discussions, and I've noticed him watching other children rather than engaging directly. When I've tried to talk with him about it, he just says everything's fine. The pieces started clicking into place. Tyler's recent quietness, his reluctance to go to family events the way he'd been second-guessing himself lately. Patricia's poison hadn't just affected our family's perception of him. It was affecting Tyler's perception of himself. That afternoon, I sat Tyler down for the most difficult conversation of my life. Buddy, I need to ask you some questions, and I want you to tell me the truth, okay? He nodded solemnly, those serious brown eyes fixed on my face. Has anyone at school been treating you differently lately? Maybe asking about your behavior or watching you more closely? Tyler's face flushed red. Mrs. Patterson keeps asking if I'm feeling okay? And Mrs. Rodriguez from the counselor's office wanted to talk to me about adjusting to change. I told them I was fine, but they kept asking. My heart broke a little more with each revelation. Has anyone talked to you about your behavior at family gatherings? Aunt Patricia said I need to work on being more respectful. She said Grandma and Grandpa are worried about me because I don't follow instructions well. Tyler's voice got smaller. She said if I don't get better at listening, people won't want to be around me anymore. The manipulation was even more insidious than I'd realized. Patricia hadn't just been documenting Tyler's supposed misbehavior for the family. She'd been telling Tyler directly that he was disappointing everyone, that his natural childhood responses were character flaws that made him unlovable. Tyler listened to me very carefully. You are not a bad kid. You are kind, smart, funny, and good-hearted. Nothing about you needs to be fixed or corrected. Aunt Patricia is wrong. But I could see the doubt in his eyes. When trusted adults repeatedly tell a child that he's the problem, that doubt becomes a poison that's hard to extract. That evening, I made a decision that would have consequences I couldn't yet imagine. I called Patricia directly, determined to confront her about her interference in Tyler's life. Abram, I'm glad you called. She answered, her voice warm and professional. I've been hoping we could discuss Tyler's progress. Progress, Patricia? What gives you the right to contact his school behind my back? I was trying to help coordinate his support system. Consistency is crucial for children with behavioral challenges. Tyler doesn't have behavioral challenges. You've manufactured this entire narrative to make yourself feel important. Her voice shifted, becoming colder. Abram denial isn't going to help Tyler overcome his issues. I've documented multiple instances of concerning behavior, and other family members have witnessed these patterns too. You've documented normal childhood responses and twisted them into evidence of problems that don't exist. Have I? Let's see. Tyler's refusal to share toys appropriately, his resistance to family responsibilities, his emotional manipulation when corrected, his antisocial behavior at gatherings. These are patterns, Abram, not isolated incidents. The way she rattled off her list so smoothly told me she'd been preparing for this conversation. Every accusation had been carefully crafted and rehearsed. You're describing a completely different child than the one I know. Maybe that's the problem, Patricia said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. Maybe you don't know Tyler as well as you think you do. Maybe your guilt over the divorce is clouding your judgment about his needs. The accusation hit its mark. Every divorced parent carries guilt about the impact on their children, and Patricia had just weaponized mine against me. "This conversation is over," I said, but Patricia wasn't finished. "Abram running away from difficult truths won't help Tyler. He needs intervention now before these patterns become entrenched. I'm offering to help because I care about his future." As I hung up the phone, I realized that Patricia wasn't just trying to humiliate Tyler or prove herself right about his behavior. She was positioning herself as his savior, the one person who could fix the problems she'd created. And she was using my family's love and concern for Tyler to give her authority over his life. What I didn't know yet was that Patricia's campaign was about to escalate dramatically. Christmas Day hadn't been her endgame. It had been her opening move. The week between Christmas and New Year typically felt like a peaceful pause in our household, but this year it crackled with underlying tension. Tyler had become hyper-aware of his own behavior, second-guessing every action and word. I watched him ask permission to get a glass of water, apologize for laughing too loudly at a cartoon, and carefully clean up messes that weren't even messes. Patricia's psychological warfare was reshaping my confident, carefree boy into an anxious people-pleaser. On December 30th, my phone buzzed with a text from my ex-wife, Sarah. "Can we talk about Tyler? Something's not right." Sarah had moved to Portland 6 months ago for a job opportunity, and Tyler visited her every other weekend and during school breaks. Despite our divorce, we maintained good communication about Tyler's well-being. Her concern sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I called her immediately. "What's happening?" "Tyler seems different, Abram. More cautious, like he's walking on eggshells. Yesterday he asked me 3 times if it was okay for him to watch his favorite movie. When I said yes, he asked if I was sure if I wasn't just being nice. That's not like him." Sarah had always been intuitive about Tyler's emotional state. During our marriage, she'd been the one to notice when something was bothering him at school or with friends. Her observation confirmed what I'd been seeing at home. "There's something else," she continued. "I got a call from a guidance counselor at Tyler's school. Apparently there are concerns about his adjustment to the divorce and some behavioral issues that need monitoring." The blood drained from my face. "What kind of monitoring?" "They want to implement a behavior tracking system and regular check-ins with the school psychologist. The counselor said a family member with child development expertise had reached out with recommendations for supporting Tyler through this difficult transition." Patricia had expanded her reach beyond our family circle and Tyler's teacher. She was now influencing his permanent school record, potentially affecting his educational future with her fabricated concerns. Sarah listened to me carefully. Tyler doesn't need behavioral monitoring or psychological intervention. Patricia has been systematically lying about Tyler's behavior to anyone who will listen. I explained the Christmas incident, the months of documented character assassination, and Patricia's unauthorized contact with Tyler's school. Sarah's silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Abram, this is serious. If she's making false reports about Tyler's mental health that could follow him for years, we need to shut this down immediately." But when I called the school the next morning, I discovered that stopping Patricia's influence wouldn't be as simple as explaining the truth. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was sympathetic but cautious. "Mr. Collins, I understand your concern about unauthorized contact, but the information provided was consistent with some observations our staff has made independently." "What observations?" "Tyler has been more withdrawn in social situations, less likely to volunteer in class, and he seems to be watching other children's reactions before responding to adult requests. These could be signs of anxiety or uncertainty about appropriate behavior." I wanted to scream that, of course, Tyler was uncertain about appropriate behavior. When adults constantly analyze and criticize a child's natural responses, when they document normal childhood moments as evidence of character flaws, the child learns to doubt every instinct and impulse. Mrs. Rodriguez Tyler's behavioral changes are a direct result of being told by family members that his normal responses are problematic. He's not troubled. He's confused and hurt. I understand that's your perspective, Mr. Collins, but we have a responsibility to monitor students who may be struggling with adjustment issues. The behavioral tracking system is simply a precautionary measure to ensure Tyler gets support if needed. After hanging up, I realized that Patricia had created a perfect trap. Her professional credentials gave her credibility with school officials, her documentation provided evidence for her claims, and Tyler's resulting behavioral changes seemed to confirm her assessment. Anyone who challenged her narrative would appear to be in denial about a child's obvious needs. That afternoon, I decided to dig deeper into Patricia's professional background. If she was using her expertise to manipulate Tyler's situation, I needed to understand exactly what kind of expert she claimed to be. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Patricia's LinkedIn profile described her as an independent child behavioral consultant who specialized in family system interventions for children with adjustment disorders. Her client testimonials praised her ability to identify concerning patterns that parents often miss, and her compassionate but firm approach to behavioral modification. But when I cross-referenced her employment history, I found gaps and inconsistencies that raised red flags. Patricia claimed to have worked at the Riverside Child Development Center for 3 years, but when I called them, they had no record of her employment. Her supposed certification from the American Board of Child Psychology led to a website that didn't exist. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that Patricia had been embellishing, if not outright fabricating, her professional credentials. But she'd done it skillfully enough that casual verification by school officials or family members wouldn't reveal the deception. On January 2nd, Tyler came home from his first day back at school with tears in his eyes. Dad, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to meet with me twice a week now. She says it's to help me with my feelings about the divorce. But I don't have bad feelings about the divorce. I'm okay with having 2 houses. The innocence in his voice broke my heart. Tyler had actually adjusted remarkably well to the divorce, maintaining strong relationships with both parents and adapting to his new routine with minimal stress. But Patricia's intervention was creating the very problems she claimed to be addressing. What does Mrs. Rodriguez talk about in these meetings? She asks about my behavior at home and at family gatherings. She wants to know if I get angry when adults give me instructions or if I try to get out of responsibilities. She showed me pictures of faces with different emotions and asked me to point to how I feel about helping with chores. Patricia had apparently provided the school with specific questions designed to elicit responses that would support her narrative. Tyler's honest answers about preferring play to chores, his natural childhood preference for fun over work, were being interpreted as signs of oppositional behavior. Today she asked if I think the rules at Grandma's house are fair. I said sometimes I wish I didn't have to do dishes while my cousins play, and she wrote it down in her special notebook. Every session with Mrs. Rodriguez was creating more documentation for Patricia's case against Tyler. His normal childhood feelings were being pathologized and recorded as evidence of behavioral dysfunction. That evening, I made a decision that would escalate the conflict beyond anything I could have imagined. I called a meeting with my parents, determined to present them with evidence of Patricia's deception and manipulation. Mom and Dad arrived at my house on January 3rd with expressions of concerned determination. They'd obviously discussed my request for a meeting and decided to present a united front in support of Patricia's approach. "Son, we know you're struggling with this situation." Dad began settling into the familiar rhythm of family intervention. But Patricia really knows what she's talking about. She's helped other families through similar challenges. I laid out my evidence methodically. Patricia's unauthorized contact with Tyler's school, her embellished professional credentials, the months of systematic documentation designed to support a predetermined narrative about Tyler's behavior, the way Tyler's natural confidence had eroded under constant scrutiny and criticism. Mom listened with growing discomfort, occasionally glancing at Dad for reassurance. "Abram, honey, maybe Patricia got a little overzealous, but her heart is in the right place. She's genuinely concerned about Tyler's development." Mom, she's been lying about Tyler's behavior and fabricating her expertise to support those lies. This isn't overzealous concern. This is systematic psychological manipulation of a 9-year-old child. Dad's face hardened with stubborn loyalty to his eldest daughter. Patricia has never lied to us about anything important. If she says Tyler needs guidance, then Tyler needs guidance. You're too close to the situation to see it clearly. The conversation continued in painful circles for over an hour. Every piece of evidence I presented was reinterpreted or dismissed. Patricia's lies became misunderstandings. Her manipulation became professional concern. Tyler's distress became necessary growing pains. As my parents prepared to leave, Dad delivered what felt like an ultimatum. Abram, we love you and Tyler more than anything. But if you keep fighting Patricia's efforts to help, you're going to force us to choose sides. And we can't stand by and watch Tyler suffer because you're too proud to accept help. After they left, I sat in my empty living room and realized that Patricia had achieved something I hadn't thought possible. She'd convinced my parents that protecting Tyler from her influence was actually harming him. She'd positioned herself as his advocate and me as the obstacle to his well-being. But the worst revelation was still to come. The next morning, I discovered that Patricia's manipulation extended far beyond family politics and school intervention. She was building a case for something much more serious, something that could destroy my family forever. January 5th brought a phone call that changed everything. I was making Tyler breakfast when an unknown number appeared on my phone. The woman's voice was crisp and professional, with an undertone that immediately put me on edge. Mr. Collins, this is Amanda Walsh from Child Protective Services. I need to schedule a home visit to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding your son Tyler. My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the kitchen counter, watching Tyler pour syrup on his pancakes, blissfully unaware that our world was about to implode. I'm sorry, what concerns? We've received reports about potential neglect and inappropriate behavioral management strategies. I can't discuss specifics over the phone, but I need to conduct a home assessment within the next 72 hours. The room started spinning around me. Who made these reports? I can't reveal the identity of reporters, Mr. Collins, but I can tell you that multiple sources have expressed concern about Tyler's well-being. Please understand that this is a routine investigation, but your cooperation is mandatory. After scheduling the visit for January 8th, I sat across from Tyler at our breakfast table and tried to process what was happening. Someone had convinced Child Protective Services that I was an unfit father. Given everything that had happened over the past weeks, there was only one person with both the motivation and the fabricated evidence to make such a report. Patricia had gone nuclear. That afternoon, while Tyler was at school, I called every family member I could think of, desperate to understand who else might have been convinced to support Patricia's campaign. The conversations were eerily similar. Everyone had heard about Tyler's behavioral issues. Everyone believed Patricia's professional assessment. Everyone thought I was in denial about my son's needs. But it was my conversation with Uncle Frank that revealed the true scope of Patricia's manipulation. Abram. I hate to say this, but Patricia showed us photos from Christmas that really opened our eyes. That boy looked miserable doing those dishes, and when you swooped in to rescue him, well, it seemed like you were enabling his resistance to responsibility. Uncle Frank Tyler looked miserable because he was being publicly humiliated and forced to work while his cousins played. That's not how Patricia explained it. She said Tyler had volunteered to help with cleanup, but then started crying when he realized the work was harder than he expected. She said your reaction taught him that crying gets him out of responsibilities. The lies were so elaborate, so carefully constructed, that they created an alternate reality where Tyler's humiliation became evidence of my poor parenting. Patricia had rewritten history to support her narrative, and my family had accepted her version without question. She also mentioned that Tyler's been having problems at school, Uncle Frank continued. Behavioral issues that require professional intervention. She said the school contacted her because they knew she had expertise in child development. Every revelation made the situation more hopeless. Patricia had convinced my family that she was Tyler's advocate, that her intervention was necessary and professional, and that my resistance was actually harmful to Tyler's development. But the most devastating blow came that evening when Patricia herself called me. "Abram, I heard that CPS contacted you today. I want you to know that I tried to handle this within the family, but Tyler's needs have escalated beyond what informal support can address." The casual way she admitted her involvement made my vision blur with rage. "You called Child Protective Services on me. Your own brother?" "I called them about Tyler. This isn't about you, Abram. It's about a child who needs intervention that you're refusing to provide." The school counselor and I both agreed that Tyler's behavioral and emotional needs require formal assessment and support. She spoke with the calm certainty of someone who genuinely believed she was saving a child from neglectful parenting. The worst part was that I could hear the sincerity in her voice. Patricia had convinced herself that her lies were truth, that Tyler's distress was evidence of problems, rather than evidence of her manipulation. "Patricia, you've destroyed Tyler's confidence, poisoned our family against him, interfered with his education, and now you're trying to have him removed from my custody. How is any of that helping him?" "Abram, listen to yourself. You're more concerned about your own reputation than Tyler's well-being. A responsible parent would welcome professional evaluation if it could help their child." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Patricia calmly explaining how every action she'd taken was motivated by love and professional concern for Tyler's development. She'd reframed her systematic abuse as intervention, her lies as professional assessment, and her campaign to destroy our family as necessary protection for a troubled child. When Tyler came home from school that day, he could sense something was wrong immediately. "Dad, you look scared. What happened?" I knelt down to his eye level, trying to figure out how to explain that his aunt's hatred had escalated into a threat to our family's existence. "Tyler, some people are confused about whether I'm taking good care of you. Tomorrow, a nice lady is going to visit our house and ask us some questions to make sure you're happy and healthy." His eyes widened with fear. "Are they going to take me away from you?" The terror in his voice made my chest tight with grief and rage. "No, buddy. We're going to answer her questions honestly, and she's going to see that you're safe and loved and well cared for." But even as I said the words, I knew the situation was more precarious than I wanted Tyler to understand. Patricia had created months of documentation supporting her claims. She had professional credibility with school officials. She had family members who would testify to Tyler's supposed behavioral problems. And she had Tyler's own behavioral changes, caused by her manipulation, as evidence that something was wrong in his environment. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to fight an opponent who had systematically destroyed my credibility while positioning herself as Tyler's savior. Patricia had played a long game, building her case methodically, while I remained oblivious to the threat she posed. The next morning brought another devastating revelation. I was helping Tyler get ready for school when he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Dad, Aunt Patricia said that if the lady asks me questions tomorrow, I should tell the truth about feeling sad and confused lately. She said it's important to be honest about my feelings, even if it might hurt people's feelings. Patricia had been coaching Tyler for the CPS interview, priming him to provide responses that would support her narrative. She'd convinced him that his recent sadness and confusion, which she had caused through months of psychological manipulation, were feelings he needed to share with the investigator. "Tyler, when the lady asks you questions, you should absolutely tell the truth about your feelings. But remember that you felt happy and confident before Christmas, right? You only started feeling sad and confused after family members started telling you there was something wrong with your behavior. But I could see the uncertainty in Tyler's eyes. When adults spend months telling a child that his natural responses are problematic, that child begins to doubt his own perceptions and memories. Tyler genuinely wasn't sure anymore whether his current distress was a sign of problems in his environment or problems within himself. As I dropped Tyler off at school that morning, I realized that Patricia had achieved something truly diabolical. She'd created the very problems she claimed to be addressing, then positioned herself as the solution to those problems. Tyler's anxiety and self-doubt, which were direct results of her manipulation, now appeared to be evidence that he needed her intervention. The CPS investigation was scheduled for the next day, and I had less than 24 hours to figure out how to defend against an opponent who had spent months building her case while destroying mine. What I didn't know yet was that Patricia had made one crucial mistake in her campaign against Tyler and me. In her confidence that she had won, she was about to overplay her hand in a way that would expose the true nature of her motivations. The morning of January 8th arrived gray and cold, matching my emotional state as I prepared for the most important conversation of my life. Amanda Walsh from Child Protective Services was scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m., and I'd spent the previous night organizing documentation of Tyler's academic success medical records, showing his good health and character references from teachers and neighbors. But I knew that my evidence would pale in comparison to Patricia's months of systematic documentation and professional credibility. I needed something more powerful than defensive explanations. I needed to go on the offense. At 9:30, while Tyler was safely at school, I made a decision that felt desperate, but necessary. I called the Riverside Child Development Center the facility, where Patricia claimed to have worked for 3 years. I'm calling to verify employment for Patricia Thompson, who says she worked there from 2018 to 2021, I told the Human Resources representative. I'm sorry, but we have no record of anyone by that name in our employment database. Are you sure you have the correct facility? The confirmation of Patricia's fabricated credentials gave me the first piece of ammunition I needed. But it wasn't enough to derail a CPS investigation based on multiple reports and documented behavioral concerns. Amanda Walsh arrived precisely on time, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She explained the investigation process clearly and began her assessment with questions about Tyler's routine health and general well-being. Mr. Collins, I want you to know that these reports came from multiple sources who expressed genuine concern about Tyler's emotional state and behavioral development. Can you help me understand what might be causing these concerns? I took a deep breath and laid out the entire story. Patricia's months-long campaign of character assassination, her unauthorized contact with Tyler's school, her fabricated professional credentials, the systematic manipulation that had transformed my confident son into an anxious, self-doubting child. Amanda listened without interruption, taking detailed notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Collins, these are serious allegations. If accurate, they suggest that the reports we received may be part of a targeted harassment campaign rather than legitimate child welfare concerns. How can I prove that to you? I'll need to conduct my own independent assessment of Tyler's well-being and interview him without coaching from any family member. I'll also need to verify the claims about fabricated credentials and unauthorized school contact. When Tyler came home from school that afternoon, Amanda conducted her interview with him in our living room, while I waited anxiously in the kitchen. Through the doorway, I could see Tyler's animated expressions as he talked about his friends, his favorite subjects, and his hobbies. For the first time in weeks, he looked like his old self, comfortable and confident in his own home environment. After an hour, Amanda called me back into the room. Tyler, can you tell your dad what you told me about feeling sad lately? Tyler looked between us, his young face serious with concentration. I told Miss Walsh that I started feeling bad after Christmas because Aunt Patricia said I was being disrespectful and needed to learn better behavior. but I don't understand what I did wrong, because I was trying to be good." Amanda turned to me. "Mr. Collins, based on my assessment, Tyler appears to be a well-adjusted child who's experiencing anxiety due to external pressures and criticism. His responses to my questions were age-appropriate, emotionally healthy, and consistent with a child who feels secure in his home environment." The relief was overwhelming, but Amanda wasn't finished. "However, I need to follow up on these reports thoroughly. I'll be contacting Tyler's school directly to verify the claims about behavioral concerns and unauthorized professional consultation. I'll also be reaching out to verify the credentials of the person who made these reports." Over the next 3 days, Amanda conducted a thorough investigation that gradually revealed the scope of Patricia's deception. Tyler's teacher confirmed that his behavior had never been problematic until Patricia's intervention created artificial concerns. The school principal admitted they'd never actually verified Patricia's credentials before implementing her recommendations. Most damaging to Patricia's case, Amanda discovered that the supposed professional certification Patricia claimed didn't exist, and the organization that allegedly granted it had no record of her membership. On January 11th, Amanda called with news that changed everything. "Mr. Collins, I'm closing the investigation with no findings of neglect or abuse. Based on my assessment, Tyler is thriving in your care, and the reports we received appear to be unfounded. However, I'm required to document that this case involved false reporting, which is a serious matter." What does that mean for Patricia? False reporting to Child Protective Services is a criminal offense. The evidence suggests that these reports were made in bad faith, possibly as part of a personal vendetta, rather than genuine child welfare concerns. I'll be referring this case to law enforcement for potential prosecution. But even as I celebrated this victory, I knew that Patricia wasn't finished. That evening, she called me with a desperation I'd never heard in her voice before. "Abram, we need to talk. The CPS investigation has gotten out of hand, and I think there's been some misunderstanding about my involvement." "There's no misunderstanding, Patricia. You filed false reports to try to have Tyler removed from my custody." "That's not what happened. I was genuinely concerned about Tyler's well-being, and I may have relied on some outdated information about my professional background. But everything I did was motivated by love for Tyler." The conversation revealed something I hadn't expected. Patricia genuinely seemed to believe her own lies. She'd convinced herself so thoroughly that Tyler needed her intervention that she couldn't see the manipulation and abuse she'd inflicted on a 9-year-old child. "Patricia, your love for Tyler has traumatized him and nearly destroyed our family. You need professional help to understand why you thought any of this was acceptable." "I don't need help, Abram. I need my family to trust my expertise and support my efforts to help Tyler reach his potential." Even faced with the collapse of her entire campaign, Patricia maintained her delusion that she was Tyler's advocate rather than his abuser. It was a level of self-deception that made me realize she might be genuinely unstable rather than simply manipulative. But the next day brought news that gave me hope for finally stopping Patricia's campaign against Tyler. Amanda Walsh called to inform me that law enforcement was taking the case seriously and that Patricia would be facing charges for filing false reports to Child Protective Services. "Mr. Collins, Detective Ryan Martinez will be contacting you soon to get your statement. The prosecutor's office believes they have a strong case based on the evidence of systematic false reporting and fabricated credentials." As I hung up the phone, I realized that Patricia's nuclear option had backfired spectacularly. Her attempt to use Child Protective Services as a weapon against Tyler and me had exposed her deception to law enforcement and created a criminal case that would finally hold her accountable for months of psychological abuse. But I also knew that cornered predators are often most dangerous when their victims start fighting back. Patricia's next move would determine whether this nightmare was finally ending or about to escalate beyond anything we'd experienced so far. Detective Ryan Martinez was a compact man with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. When he arrived at my house on January 13th to take my statement, he brought with him a thick folder of evidence that Amanda Walsh had compiled during her investigation. Mr. Collins, I've seen cases of false reporting before, but this one is particularly disturbing because of the systematic nature of the deception and the involvement of a child. Can you walk me through the timeline of events? For the next 2 hours, I laid out every detail of Patricia's campaign against Tyler, from the initial family group chat humiliation, through the fabricated professional credentials and false CPS reports. Detective Martinez took detailed notes and asked probing questions that revealed he understood the psychological manipulation involved. Mr. Collins, we've already verified that Ms. Thompson's claimed professional certifications are fraudulent. We've also confirmed with Tyler's school that she misrepresented her authority to make educational recommendations. But I need to understand her motivation for targeting your son specifically. I explained Patricia's childhood resentment, her jealousy over perceived favoritism, and her apparent belief that she was qualified to fix Tyler's supposed behavioral problems. But as I spoke, I realized that the full scope of her motivation was darker than I'd understood. Detective Martinez, I think Patricia saw Tyler as a way to prove her superior parenting expertise to our family. She needed him to be a problem child, so she could position herself as his savior. When that didn't work, she escalated to trying to remove him from my custody so she could have complete control over his upbringing. Detective Martinez nodded grimly. We've seen similar patterns in cases involving individuals with narcissistic tendencies who fixate on children as objects to be controlled rather than people to be protected. That afternoon, Detective Martinez interviewed Tyler with a child psychologist present to ensure the questioning was age-appropriate and non-traumatic. Tyler's clear, honest responses about Patricia's manipulation and his resulting anxiety provided additional evidence for the criminal case. But the breakthrough came 2 days later when Detective Martinez called with news that changed everything. Mr. Collins, we executed a search warrant for Ms. Thompson's electronic devices and discovered some very disturbing evidence. She's been documenting her campaign against Tyler in detail, including recordings of conversations where she admits to fabricating behavioral incidents. My hands shook as Detective Martinez explained what they'd found. Patricia had been keeping audio recordings of her phone calls with family members, school officials, and even me. In her arrogance, she documented her own criminal behavior, apparently believing that her recordings would prove her professional expertise and Tyler's need for intervention. Instead, the recordings revealed her systematic deception and manipulation. In one conversation with my mother, Patricia admitted to exaggerating Tyler's responses to create clearer examples of problematic behavior. In another call with Tyler's school counselor, she acknowledged that some of her professional credentials were pending verification while presenting herself as a fully qualified expert. Most damaging of all, Patricia had recorded herself coaching Tyler before family gatherings, instructing him on how to respond to adult requests in ways that would appear defiant or inappropriate. She'd been literally teaching him behaviors that she could then document as evidence of his supposed problems. Mr. Collins, these recordings provide clear evidence of child psychological abuse fraud and filing false reports. The prosecutor's office is preparing charges that could result in significant jail time. But Patricia's downfall accelerated beyond the criminal investigation. Word of her fraudulent credentials spread quickly through our small community, destroying her reputation as a child development expert. Families who had paid her for consultations demanded refunds and threatened their own legal action. The most satisfying reversal came from within our own family. When Detective Martinez interviewed my parents about Patricia's campaign, they were forced to confront recordings of her admitting to fabricating evidence against Tyler. Mom called me in tears after hearing Patricia's voice casually discussing how to manufacture more compelling examples of Tyler's defiance. Abram, honey, I'm so sorry. We trusted Patricia because she's our daughter, and because she seemed so professional and knowledgeable. We never imagined she could lie so convincingly about Tyler. Dad's apology was more difficult for him, but equally heartfelt. Son, I failed Tyler as his grandfather. I let Patricia convince me that his normal childhood behavior was problematic, and I supported her campaign against an innocent little boy. I don't know how to make this right. The family group chat that had once celebrated Tyler's Christmas humiliation became a stream of apologies and expressions of support. Relatives who had praised Patricia's tough love approach were horrified to learn they'd been manipulated into participating in psychological abuse of a 9-year-old child. But the most dramatic reversal came from Patricia's own husband, Marcus. Detective Martinez interviewed him as part of the investigation, and Marcus revealed that he'd been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Patricia's obsession with Tyler over the past months. She talked about Tyler constantly, Marcus told Detective Martinez. She'd analyze every interaction they had, looking for signs of disrespect or defiance. When I suggested maybe Tyler was just being a normal kid, she'd lecture me about enabling problematic behavior patterns. Marcus filed for divorce 3 days after Patricia's arrest, seeking full custody of their twin daughters and requesting a restraining order to prevent Patricia from unsupervised contact with any children. His testimony about Patricia's escalating obsession with controlling Tyler provided additional evidence for the prosecution's case. The criminal charges against Patricia were filed on January 20th, 3 counts of filing false reports to Child Protective Services fraud related to misrepresenting professional credentials and child psychological abuse. The prosecutor, a woman named Claire Stevens, who specialized in crimes against children, explained to me that Patricia's systematic campaign represented one of the most elaborate cases of psychological abuse she'd ever prosecuted. Mr. Collins, your sister-in-law, didn't just lie about Tyler's behavior. She engaged in a sustained campaign of psychological warfare against a child using manipulation techniques designed to destroy his confidence and self-worth. The recordings we recovered show a level of premeditation and malice that goes far beyond family dysfunction. But even as Patricia faced serious criminal charges, she continued to maintain her innocence and professional authority. According to Detective Martinez, she insisted during her arrest interview that Tyler genuinely needed intervention and that her methods, while perhaps overzealous, were motivated by legitimate professional concerns. She seems genuinely unable to recognize that she's been abusing Tyler rather than helping him, Detective Martinez explained. In her mind, she's the victim of a family that refuses to accept her expertise. Patricia's delusion extended to her legal defense strategy. Her attorney attempted to argue that she was a concerned professional who had made some procedural errors but had never intended to harm Tyler. The strategy collapsed when the prosecution played recordings of Patricia admitting to fabricating evidence and coaching Tyler to display problematic behaviors. As Patricia's trial date approached, I focused on helping Tyler heal from months of psychological manipulation. With the truth finally exposed, Tyler's natural confidence began returning gradually. He stopped apologizing for normal childhood behaviors, started expressing his opinions without fear of criticism, and began looking forward to family gatherings again. But the most meaningful moment came when Tyler asked me a question that showed how much he'd grown through this ordeal. Dad, why did Aunt Patricia want everyone to think I was bad? What did I do to make her hate me? I explained that Patricia's actions had nothing to do with Tyler's behavior and everything to do with her own psychological problems. Some adults have trouble accepting that children are just learning and growing, Tyler. Aunt Patricia wanted to control how you developed instead of letting you be yourself. Tyler thought about this for a long moment. So when adults say kids are bad, sometimes it's really the adults who have problems. Sometimes, buddy, that's why it's important to trust your own feelings and remember that you're a good person, even when other people try to make you doubt yourself. Patricia's trial was scheduled for March 15th, but the evidence against her was so overwhelming that her attorney began pushing for a plea bargain. The recordings, the fabricated credentials, the false CPS reports, and the testimony from multiple witnesses had created an ironclad case that virtually guaranteed conviction. But as winter melted into spring, I realized that Patricia's defeat in court would only be part of Tyler's healing process. The real victory would come when my son fully understood that he was loved, valued, and protected by people who saw his true worth rather than manufactured flaws. The morning of June 25th brought warm sunshine streaming through our kitchen windows as Tyler helped me prepare breakfast for his cousins Emma and Jack, who were visiting for the week. But this time, Tyler's kitchen work was voluntary, joyful, and shared equally with his cousins. The contrast to Christmas morning 6 months earlier couldn't have been more dramatic. Patricia's trial had concluded 3 weeks earlier with her conviction on all charges. She received 2 years in prison for the false CPS reports and fraud, plus 3 years of supervised probation that prohibited her from working with children. The judge's sentencing comments still echoed in my mind. Ms. Thompson engaged in a calculated campaign of psychological abuse against a child using fabricated professional credentials to give weight to her manipulation. The damage she inflicted on Tyler Collins and his family represents a profound betrayal of trust and professional ethics. But Patricia's legal punishment was only one part of her complete downfall. Her reputation in our community had been destroyed so thoroughly that she'd become a cautionary tale about the dangers of false reporting and child psychological abuse. The families she'd previously consulted had all demanded refunds and threatened their own legal action for fraudulent services. Marcus had been granted full custody of their twins, and Patricia was restricted to supervised visitation only. Her own children, who had witnessed her manipulation of Tyler, were receiving therapy to process their mother's behavior and learn healthier relationship patterns. The most satisfying reversal had come within our extended family. The relatives who had once praised Patricia's expertise and supported her campaign against Tyler now went out of their way to shower him with affection and validation. Uncle Frank, who had believed Patricia's lies about Tyler's behavioral problems, now made a point of praising Tyler's helpfulness and good manners at every family gathering. "Tyler, you're such a thoughtful young man," Aunt Dorothy had told him at Memorial Day dinner. "I'm so sorry we didn't see how special you were when Patricia was confusing us with her lies." But the most meaningful transformation had occurred in Tyler himself. The anxious, self-doubting child of Christmas morning had been replaced by a confident, articulate 10-year-old who understood his own worth and trusted his own perceptions. Tyler had learned a lesson that would serve him well throughout his life. Sometimes adults are wrong, and sometimes standing up for truth requires tremendous courage. "Dad, remember when Aunt Patricia tried to make everyone think I was bad?" Tyler asked as we scrambled eggs together. "I'm glad you believed me instead of her." Tyler, a parent's job is to protect their children from people who want to hurt them, even when those people are family members. I should have recognized what Patricia was doing earlier. But you figured it out eventually and you stopped her. That's what matters. Tyler's resilience and wisdom continually amazed me. Despite months of psychological manipulation, he'd emerged from the experience with a stronger sense of himself and a clearer understanding of healthy versus unhealthy relationships. The breakfast preparation was interrupted by a phone call from Detective Martinez, who had become a family friend during the investigation and prosecution of Patricia's case. "Abram, I wanted to give you an update on the Victim Restitution Fund. Patricia's required to pay for Tyler's therapy costs and any other expenses related to her abuse." "How's she doing in prison?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. According to her counselor, she still maintains that she was trying to help Tyler and that her methods were professionally sound. She seems genuinely unable to accept that she psychologically abused a child. Patricia's continued delusion didn't surprise me. People who engage in systematic manipulation often convince themselves so thoroughly of their own righteousness that they can't recognize the harm they've caused. But her inability to accept responsibility meant that Tyler would never receive a genuine apology for the trauma she'd inflicted. Detective Martinez Tyler's doing so well now that I don't think he needs Patricia's apology to heal completely. He's learned to trust himself and recognize manipulation when he sees it. That's a better outcome than any forced apology could provide. After hanging up, I reflected on how much our lives had changed since Christmas morning. Tyler's relationship with his grandparents had been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. His school performance had improved dramatically once the artificial behavioral concerns were removed from his record. Most importantly, Tyler had learned that he was worthy of protection and that adults who truly cared about him would listen to his concerns rather than dismiss them. The morning's most touching moment came when Tyler's cousin Emma asked him to teach her how to wash dishes properly. "Tyler's really good at kitchen stuff," she told me proudly. "He showed me how to get all the soap bubbles off without wasting water." The same activity that had been used to humiliate Tyler 6 months earlier had become a source of pride and connection with his cousins. Patricia's weapon of shame had been transformed into an opportunity for Tyler to demonstrate competence and helpfulness. Later that afternoon, Sarah arrived to pick up Tyler for their summer vacation trip to California. Our co-parenting relationship had been strengthened by surviving Patricia's attempt to destroy our family, and Sarah's support during the legal proceedings had been invaluable. "Abram Tyler seems like a completely different child than he was 6 months ago," she observed. "He's confident, talkative, and excited about life again." "You did an amazing job protecting him from Patricia's manipulation." "We both did," I corrected. This experience taught me how important it is for divorced parents to present a united front when someone threatens their child's well-being. As Tyler packed his suitcase for the California trip, he made a comment that encapsulated everything he'd learned from surviving Patricia's psychological warfare. "Dad, I used to think adults were always right, and kids had to accept whatever adults said. But now I know that kids can have good judgment too, and sometimes we need to speak up when adults are wrong about us." That wisdom would serve Tyler well throughout his life, protecting him from future manipulation and giving him the confidence to trust his own perceptions even when authority figures disagreed with him. The evening concluded with a family barbecue in our backyard, attended by grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, who had all learned valuable lessons about the importance of independent thinking and the dangers of blind trust in claimed expertise. Mom and Dad had worked tirelessly to rebuild their relationship with Tyler, and their obvious pride in his resilience was evident in every interaction. "Tyler, would you like to help me flip these burgers?" Dad asked, offering Tyler the spatula. "Sure, Grandpa, but only if you want my help. I don't have to cook if you prefer to do it yourself." Dad's eyes filled with tears as he realized Tyler was giving him permission to decline his assistance, something Patricia had never allowed. "Tyler, I would love your help with anything anytime you want to offer it." As I watched 3 generations of my family cooking together in harmony, I understood that Patricia's attempt to destroy Tyler had ultimately strengthened our family bonds and taught us all important lessons about love protection and the difference between genuine concern and manipulative control. The final irony was that Patricia's campaign to prove her superior parenting expertise had accomplished the exact opposite. She demonstrated conclusively that love without respect is manipulation, that professional credentials without ethics are meaningless, and that children thrive when they're accepted for who they are rather than molded into someone else's vision of perfection. 6 months after Patricia's Christmas morning humiliation of Tyler Karma had indeed come full circle. She was in prison, her reputation destroyed, her family broken, and her victim thriving despite her best efforts to break his spirit. Tyler had learned that he was strong enough to survive adult cruelty and wise enough to recognize it when he encountered it in the future. As the sun set on our summer barbecue, Tyler approached me with a serious expression. "Dad, I want to thank you for protecting me from Aunt Patricia, even when other people thought you were wrong. Tyler, protecting you is my most important job. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what she was doing to you. You figured it out when it mattered most. That's what good parents do." The simple wisdom of a 10-year-old who had survived psychological warfare and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. Patricia's cruelty had been transformed into Tyler's strength. Her manipulation had become his insight, and her attempt to destroy our family had ultimately made us unbreakable. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding difficult battles, but from fighting them with courage, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the people we love. Tyler learned that he was worth defending. I learned that family loyalty must never override child protection, and our entire family learned that truth has its own power when people have the courage to speak it. 6 months after Christmas morning, Tyler was washing dishes again, but this time he was teaching his cousins, sharing knowledge, and building relationships through service freely chosen rather than humiliation forcibly imposed. Patricia's weapon had become Tyler's gift. Her shame had become his pride, and her manipulation had become our family's strength. That's the true power of karma. It doesn't just punish wrongdoers, it transforms their weapons into tools of healing and growth for their victims. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who was hurting someone you love? How did you find the courage to fight for what was right, even when other people didn't believe you? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help other parents recognize manipulation and protect their children from psychological abuse. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales about family courage, childhood resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right. Share this video with anyone who needs to remember that children deserve protection from adult manipulation, no matter who the manipulator is. Remember, protecting the people you love sometimes means fighting battles that seem impossible to win, but truth has its own strength when people have the courage to speak it. Thank you for listening to Tyler's story, and may you always have the wisdom to recognize manipulation and the courage to stand against it. Until next time, keep protecting the innocent, keep speaking the truth, and keep believing in the power of love to overcome even the most calculated cruelty.